Good evening, my washers and dryers, and welcome back to the Laundromat, where today we are finishing up the Thicc Nonficc for 2022, where we have been reading Phenomena by Annie Jacobson, which is all about the US government's secret experiments into ESP and other psychic phenomena, hence the title. This is the video on part 4, which is the modern era, and kind of follows the collapse of these experiments, kind of follows the collapse of these practices. This part, by and large, kind of goes into how these practices and how this philosophy has persisted in a way without, being a fully funded kind of pet project of the CIA or the Defense Department. The reason that these practices have not persisted are really summed up in a quote from the CIA on why they canceled the program, when they said, "There exists no satisfactory theoretical understanding of these phenomena. Present theories, of which there are many, are both speculative and unsubstantiated." They point out that, sure, we've seen a lot of results in the laboratory, but trying to put those out into the real world hasn't resulted in anything. The laboratory studies do not provide evidence regarding the sources or origins of the phenomena, and that's a huge part of why they would even bother to keep going. If they could prove where it came from, if they could prove what it does, they could create a process, they could make it repeatable so that anyone could do it, and unfortunately, that's not really what it can do. That being said, in 2014, the Office of Naval Research embarked on a 4-year, $3.85 million research program to explore the phenomena it calls premonition and intuition, or spidey sense, for sailors and Marines. They said, if we can characterize this intuitive decision-making process and model it, then the hope is to accelerate the acquisition of these skills. They need it to be repeatable and practical. They don't have time for people to tap into it, get into the vibe, get into the headspace. They need it to go. They need it to work now. And unfortunately, they just can't. But that being said, government programs that claim to harness the power of the mind to influence matter exist across the Defense Department today. So even, again, if it is not a fully funded pet project of these institutions, it is still being used. And some of it is being effective. Transcendental meditation, which kind of is a bit of an offshoot of all of these practices, is utilized in the Operation Warrior Wellness Program, which is offered at Army and Marine bases and veterans administrations across the country. They use transcendental meditation to help with PTSD. And it's pretty effective. There are some people who kind of push it to the side, but hey, if it helps, it helps. Additionally, at the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, and the U.S. Army, they're working on technology to build mental telepathy systems, or synthetic telepathy, for the modern era. So even if they can't reproduce it, even if they can't get people to do it, surely there's got to be some way to plug people into something, kind of like a metaverse or something. So that's the technical side of it. The rest of this part kind of focuses on the people that we've met over the course of the book, kind of following their falling action and kind of following up with them where they live. Hal Puthoff, he worked at the Institute for Advanced Studies at Austin in Texas since 1985, and I believe he retired recently. But he did confirm to the author that he continues to act as a consultant on a lot of government black programs, the ones we can't tell you about, the sneak. Uri Geller ended up moving back to Israel. He stayed in London for a bit, and the author got to interview him there to kind of learn more about the spoon bending aspect of it. But he ended up becoming, again, kind of a very important public figure in Israel. The former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was really close friends with him, which was kind of wild. I would like to kind of end the portion talking about the book. This went very, very quickly to talk about the end of the book. But to kind of end the topic of the book with a quote from a guy named Desmond Morris, who is of the Zoological Society of London. Desmond Morris had met Uri Geller, and Geller had taught him how to bend spoons. And Morris learned that it was kind of a trick of rubbing your thumbs, but then Geller did it on a bunch of spoons he wasn't touching, and he was impressed, and he couldn't explain it. And so I want to end the general discussion of the book, of the recounting of everything, with his quote where he says, "As a scientist, I would like to make it clear that because I cannot explain how he bends the metal, this does not mean that I accept any supernatural or psychic explanation for the ability." And maybe that's where I'm at too, is there's a ton of things in this world that I cannot explain, And it's okay to not know. Maybe it's a magic trick. I just want to be impressed with the sleight of hand. I don't need to know how it works, because I am not in charge of any government black programs that needs to explain why it works. Maybe it's real, maybe it's not, but it was worth spending decades of work and millions of dollars to learn more about. Doesn't necessarily mean I believe in the psychic aspect of it. But if you can bend a spoon, and that, in a nutshell, is Phenomena. Like I said, it gets a little dry part of the way through it, and so at least for me it was a bit of a struggle to kind of sit down for the rest of part 3. But I think if you are into science fiction, if you are into kind of obscure weird history, if you are a fan of Wendigoon's channel content, I think Phenomena would be right up your alley, as well as some other books that I want to talk about if you want to follow up and learn more. So for starters, the CIA plays a huge role in this book, and so if you want to learn more about the CIA, I have a couple of recommendations there. The first one I'd recommend is The Devil's Chessboard by David Talbot, which specifically is about Allen Dulles and his tenure at the CIA. There's a quote from Allen Dulles from 1953 in this, so if you want to learn more about his tenure specifically and kind of the Cold War aspect of it, this is definitely the one I would recommend in that regard. I'm sorry, that was probably a really loud thump against the book. I would recommend The Devil's Chessboard, as well as Legacy of Ashes by Tim Weiner, which is a history of the CIA. It is another thick boy. This was almost what I read this year. This goes into like national security, the CIA directors specifically, and how their tenure affected the country and the organization. So again, if you are interested in the CIA aspect of Phenomena, I recommend going with those. If you are interested in reading more of Annie Jacobsen's work, as well as reading more about something like DARPA, I recommend The Pentagon's Brain, which is all about military research. I copped this from my thesis advisor's bookshelves one day, and that made my life. But this is another book. DARPA is mentioned in Phenomena, and again, if you like the way she writes, following it up with another one of hers is a good idea. If you like the early stuff, the early vintage psychic phenomena stuff where we're experimenting more with drugs to find mind-altering states, I cannot recommend The Harvard Psychedelic Club by Don Lattin enough. I love this book. This is all about Timothy Leary, Ramdas Hassan Smith, and Andrew Weil, and the just bonkers LSD stuff that they did. I love this book. I read it my senior year of college, and because Timothy Leary used to be a professor, and so when I read it, I wondered what it would be like to have him as a thesis advisor. And so I've written some stuff that kind of mirrors that, but this is a much faster book. I thoroughly recommend it. It is so much fun. You cannot go wrong with this topic, so this would be what I recommend in that respect. And additionally, if you want fiction in the vein of this, I recommend Spoonbenders by Daryl Gregory, which is so much fun, all about a family of people with psychic abilities, and the mom of the family was actually involved in some of those like black program stuff. So if you're into that, that is what I would recommend. And with that wraps up Thicc Nonfic for 2022. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I think I hit my stride right at the end. I do enjoy doing this, if just for myself, to encourage me to read nonfiction, to go through some of my backlog to get there, and just have a fun time talking about it. Sometimes these topics are really cool. Did you read a giant book for summer? Let me know. Are there any topics that you would be interested in hearing about? I make no guarantees, but I am curious what you like, where your mind's at. And just because I am reading books this year, I do want to briefly talk about what I'm reading in September, where the theme is the letter S. That was the best thing I could come up with. I didn't have like a cohesive theme. Kids are already back in school. I couldn't do like a back to school theme. So the theme is the letter S. All of the titles start with the letter S. We have Silence by Shusaku Endo, Spellslinger by Sebastian de Castel, Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft, Siren Queen by Nevo, and Star Eater by Kirsten Hall. Thank you all so much for watching this. Thank you for indulging my odd tangents, rambles, and just kind of meandering through whatever topic interests me. It really does mean the most. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're having a lovely, lovely evening, and I will see you all next time.